Apparently, MLB spoke directly to Stacey Abrams before they decided to move the All-Star game. Oh, well, if Stacey Abrams is super pissed, maybe we ought to just cut off all business with the state of Georgia. Then you are explicitly political actors and you will be treated as such. We have a large issue in the United States that is worthy of talking about. And that is that there's a huge swath of America that believes they are engaged in the quote-unquote resistance when they are, in fact, the dominant upper hand in American politics right now. These folks are not the resistance. They are the most powerful voices in our society, and posing themselves as the resistance allows them to get away with quashing dissent. I'm old enough to remember when the Democratic Party suggested that corporations should have no voice in politics at all. Corporations were not people. Corporations were bad, 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 bad. This is why we needed campaign finance reform, because if you owned a corporation and you gave money from your LLC to some sort of campaign, this meant that you were engaged in an attempt to strip American democracy of all of its plenitude. It was an attempt to get rid of the diversity of American democracy using institutional power. Now, however, the left has realized that they ought to do with corporations what they have done with nearly every other institution in American society and simply grasp the means of distribution. And they're now going to leftize all of the means of distribution of institutional power in our society. The greatest indicator of this, of course, is that apparently on Sunday, there was a meeting of more than 100 chief executives and corporate leaders. They gathered online Sunday, according to the Washington Post, to discuss taking new action to combat the controversial state voting bills being considered across the country, including the one recently signed into law in Georgia. So you now have major corporations that have decided to just do the work of the Democratic Party. And the reason they're doing the work of the Democratic Party is because they believe that the Democratic Party is in an unbreakable ascendancy right now. They believe that the country is moving ever more leftward and that there is no worry that there will be backlash from the right. And so they are just going to do what the Democratic Party wants them to do. And in return, presumably the Democratic Party will leave them alone a little bit or grant them additional regulatory power or give them tax breaks or ensure in some other regulatory fashion that their opponents are stifled. That's what's really going on here. Because if you believe that all these major corporations gave two damns about Georgia's voting law, which again, does not restrict the right to vote. It does not. Voter ID is not a restriction on the right to vote. Maintaining more ballot boxes than there were in 2016 is not a restriction on the right to vote. Broadening voting hours in many counties is not a restriction on the right to vote. But these corporations know that they have to just become the another wing of the Democratic Party, the privatized wing of the Democratic Party, or the Democrats are going to come after them. And so they are caving on behalf of the Democrats. This is extremely dangerous stuff. There are tens of millions of Americans who work for these companies. I saw a chart over the weekend. It showed the political donations from employees of America's biggest companies, nearly all. A majority of employees of those companies gave to Democrats. So what we are watching is the complete hijacking of corporate America on behalf of the radical left. And then you will watch a cram down happen internally inside these companies and an attitude taken with regard to the customer base that requires that you accede to their politics. This is deeply dangerous stuff. These corporations have decided that they are going to just shift into the Democratic Party playbook. And they're doing something different than corporations have done in the past. Corporations have always given money to politicians. Right? There's been a thing for a very, very long time in American politics, and that is not rare. Nobody would be surprised to see the heads of Google give money to Democrats. Nobody would be particularly surprised to see the heads of Walmart give money to Republicans. Right? None of this was particularly shocking. What is shocking is that corporate America is now seeking to punish the voters directly. That is a different thing. Okay, so corporations deciding that they want to give to this politician or not give to that politician, those are corporate political decisions that have been going on for a long time, right? They have lobbyists. Those lobbyists have been working in Washington literally for at this point, centuries in America. But there's a different thing going on when you have corporations that are openly targeting the voting population and attempting to bully them into voting the way they want. That is a different thing entirely. It's amazing. The same left that will suggest that corporations are bullying their own employees for not pushing in favor of unionization, that's not bullying. That is just a free market exchange. Those same people will be perfectly happy with corporations removing their business from places simply based on the politics of those places and how people voted in those places. And they are ecstatic that MLB removed the All-Star game from Atlanta, Georgia, because Georgian voters decided that they were going to vote in favor of Republicans in the State House. Punishing the population is a very, very different thing than punishing particular politicians. Nobody's saying you have to give to Republicans. You want to be a corporation and give to Democrats? So be it. Don't expect a lot of help from Republicans on the other end. Right? Why would you? But if you are a corporation and you are targeting the voting base itself, that is a completely different thing. Frankly, this is a standard that we've had with our own advertisers here on shows like this one. Now, there are advertisers who have decided they no longer want to advertise with us. That's their prerogative. But when you target the people who listen to the show, when you say the people who listen to the show are bad, or their views are bad, and they're not doing business because you don't like the views of the people who listen to the show, well, then you're on the other side. A business decision is not the same as a political decision, and these corporations are jumping full scale into making political decisions by attempting to blackmail states. That is what they are doing right now. And these are major corporations. Remember, these are the people who are in institutional power. These are not outsiders attempting to stop the march of fascism. These are political insiders, extraordinarily connected, extraordinarily wealthy. This is not the masses who are attempting to rise up against power. This is the powerful. The voters of Georgia are significantly less powerful than the heads of Google and MLB. No question about it. According to Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, a Yale management professor who organized the call, executives from major airlines, retailers, and manufacturers, plus at least one NFL owner, talked about potential ways to show they oppose the legislation, including by halting donations to politicians who support the bills, and even delaying investments in states that pass the restrictive measures. Now, again, your prerogative, you don't want to give money to Republicans. Again, don't expect that those Republicans are then going to rush to your defense when it comes to you proclaiming your allegiance to free market principles, because you don't give a damn about free market principles, obviously. You're backing the party that stands against them. But by the same token, very different thing. If you've decided you are literally going to boycott those states, if you're going to boycott those states, now you have engaged in political warfare upon your own consumer base. You have decided that people who don't think like you ought not consume your product. Fine. You believe that? We will take you up on that. We will 100% take you up on that. And we'll fight back as consumers. We'll start our own businesses. These are dangerous, dangerous things. And by the way, it seems to me perfectly justified that in America, in which anti-discrimination law rules the roost, in which anti-discrimination law, which has been in the ascendancy in the United States since the 1960s for originally some good reasons and now some very bad reasons, anti-discrimination law, which is rooted in the idea that freedom of association must be curbed in the name of ability to patronize. If you believe that, then it seems to me well within the realm of possibility that states are simply going to start adding political orientation as a basis for non-refusal of service in states across the country. That if you're going to do business in Georgia, you don't get to decide who you do business with based on politics. Otherwise, you can just leave. It seems like that is the way that a lot of these states are going to go. I know that discussion is being had at the highest levels in some of the red states that you're seeing right now, because governors are not going to allow their states to essentially become the preserve of corporations that wish to bludgeon their constituencies into silence. According to the Washington Post, while no final steps were agreed upon, the meeting represents an aggressive dialing up of corporate America's stand against controversial voting measures nationwide. You think they give a damn about this? Seriously, these controversial voting measures, by the way, again, are less restrictive than many voting measures in states like Delaware, for example. These corporations didn't care 5 seconds ago, but corporations are notoriously slow to react and quick to overreact. So they're slow to react to trends. Then when they sense the trend, they react in radical hammer fashion. Nothing is done with a scalpel. Everything is done with a chainsaw. And so instead of these corporations going to the Republican legislature in Georgia and saying, here are the provisions that we don't like, this one and this one. Instead of doing that, they wait until the law is passed, and then they see that Stacey Abrams is super pissed. And then they're like, oh, well, if Stacey Abrams is super pissed, maybe we ought to just cut off all business with the state of Georgia. This is not going to work out well for you guys. It's not going to work out well for you guys, because guess what? If you guys decide not to do business in the state of Georgia, there are plenty of other people who are more than happy to do business in the state of Georgia. The consumers don't go away. The businesses do. All of this came just days after Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell warned that firms should stay out of politics, echoing a view shared by many conservative politicians and setting up the potential for additional conflict between Republican leaders and the heads of some of America's largest firms. Now, again, the media are playing this as though Republicans are the reactionary ones. Nope, the corporations are the reactionary ones. They're reacting to the predations of the radical left. And then Republicans are reacting to the fact that all of these corporations have decided to target their voters. By the way, it's now coming out that Stacey Abrams seems to be a liar. Stacey Abrams said that she had no impact on MLB moving the game. Apparently, MLB spoke directly to Stacey Abrams before they decided to move the All-Star game. Leaders from dozens of companies, Delta, American, United, Starbucks, Target, LinkedIn, Levi Strauss, Boston Consulting Group, along with the owner of the Atlanta Falcons, were included in the Zoom call. We'll have more on this in just 1 second, because this is a truly dangerous trend in American life. It's going to lead to the breakup of the country. Hey, so, according to the Washington Post, the discussion, which was scheduled to last 1 hour, but went on for 10 minutes longer, was led at times by Ken Chenault, the former chief executive of American Express, and Kenneth Frazier, the chief executive of Merck, who told the executives it was important to keep fighting what they viewed as discriminatory laws on voting. Both Chenault and Frazier are, of course, black, and they coordinated a letter signed last month by 72 black business executives that made a similar point. Now, all of this could stop if corporations just said no. That's the amazing thing about this. All corporations have to do is say, listen, we are not in the business of signing into debates over voter ID. And it's just not in our purview. What's in our purview is how, for example, the government regulates corporate earnings. What is within our purview, this is part of the other problem, right? So there are two problems. One, corporations have moved beyond simply targeting politicians based on their stances and have decided to target overt populations, which is a big change. The other thing that has happened in corporate America is that corporate America has decided that they are not going to restrict their opinions to areas in which the corporation operates. They're going to now have opinions on everything. It's going to be like, what does Coca-Cola think about this law in Arkansas that says that children should not have medical experimentation done on them for purposes of transgender verification? Well, I mean, their silence is deafening, right? Well, we have now reached the point in corporate America. We have reached the Taylor Swift's silence is deafening point in corporate America. For those who are not aware of this meme, for years, Taylor Swift was fairly apolitical. And then everybody online kept saying, whenever there was a controversial thing happening in American politics, Taylor Swift's silence is deafening. And those of us on the right were like, she makes music. Why do you care about what Taylor Swift has to say? And then Taylor Swift got hit so hard, so much from the left, that she decided to go fully woke, and she started producing songs like 10 years late about gay rights. She turned into pop star Never Stop, Never Stopping. Right? In that movie, which is very funny, there's a Andy Samberg plays a character who's this pop star, and he makes this pro-gay rights song, but he's like 20 years late on it. And so everybody's like, why is he even making this? That was Taylor Swift. Right? She makes this gay rights song like 10 years after gay marriage becomes a thing in the United States. And everybody's like, why is she? Well, it's pretty obvious why she was doing it. She was bullied into it by the left. Corporations are now the Taylor Swift of our politics. Corporations have decided that they are going to, their silence is deafening. They must speak out on everything the left demands of them. Okay, guys, well, if that's the way you want it, that's the way you're going to have it. If you're going to engage in the ultra-crepidarianism, speaking outside of your purview, in which you are not commenting anymore about corporate tax rates or the restrictions on sugar imports from Cuba, but instead, as Coca-Cola, but instead you're now going to comment on bathroom bills in North Carolina, then you are explicitly political actors and you will be treated as such. And the consuming public will do so, and Republican legislators will do so. And that is not reactionary on the part of Republicans. That is not them starting the fight. That is them simply saying, if you guys have chosen to engage in this field, you will be treated as somebody engaging in this field. You will be treated as an adjunct to the Democratic Party, which is what you are. The call's goal, according to the Washington Post, was to unify companies that had been issuing their own statements and signing on to drafted statements from different organizations after the action in Georgia, Sonnenfeld said. The leaders called in from around the country. Some chimed in from Augusta, Georgia, where they were attending the Masters. Yeah, I noticed that Rob Manfred did not, in fact, the head of MLB did not, in fact, give up his membership to Augusta National. And I've noticed that Coca-Cola has not moved its corporate headquarters. I've noticed that CNN, by the way, has not moved its corporate headquarters, which is located in Atlanta, which means presumably they endorse the Georgia voting law. That's the way this works, right? Sonnenfeld, this professor from Yale, he says, there was a defiance of the threats that businesses should stay out of politics. They were obviously rejecting that even with their presence on the call, but they were there out of concern about voting restrictions not being in the public interest. Yeah, sure. Or they were there because they know they're getting blackmailed by the left, and they are deeply afraid that their investment pension funds, union pension funds, run by the SEIU, that are going to pull money from their stock price. Okay, well, again, this game can work both ways. This can work both ways. If, by the way, these folks think that joining with corporate America is going to gain you massive popularity, let me recommend that you take a look at the Republican Party, which joined with corporate America in nearly every iteration over the past 30 years and proceeded to lose massive amounts of power in the United States. It turns out that you know what Americans typically don't like? Big corporations cramming down their views. And it's even worse when those big corporations have decided to move out of the realm of tax rates, corporate tax rates, and have decided to move into the realm of what do we think your children should be learning in school? I do not give two craps with Kenneth Chenault thinks my kid should be learning in public school. I don't want to know what American Express thinks about this. I have no interest in them. And if they try to tell me what to do, I'm just not going to patronize their business. I will take out a different credit card. And if all of the credit cards decide to do this, there will be regulations that prohibit them from doing this in red states. You can see how these corporations are going to wield their executive power in order to damage the American people. I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you stay up to date on all of our future content.